One small gesture made the alien princess think I was her mate. The crystal falls, the transport shuttle descended through Velisar's iridescent atmosphere, and Elias Crane pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below, crystalline spires rose from violet forests, and twin moons hung in a lavender sky even though it was midday. "Stop gawking. Crane?" Ambassador Whitmore muttered from across the cabin, adjusting his formal diplomatic sash. "We're here to finalize the mining treaty, not sightsee. The Velisians are a proud people with intricate customs. One wrong move could unravel months of negotiations." Elias straightened, smoothing his own uniform. At 28, he was the youngest diplomatic assistant in the Earth Corps, chosen for this mission because of his linguistic aptitude and cultural sensitivity scores. He'd studied Velisian customs for 6 months, memorized their greeting rituals, learned the proper depth of bows for various ranks. What he hadn't prepared for was Princess Lyrianne. The royal court of Velisar made Earth's most opulent palaces look modest. The throne room was carved from a single massive geode, walls glittering with embedded crystals that pulsed with soft light. Fountains of liquid silver flowed upward, defying gravity, and there, standing beside the throne on a raised dais, was the princess. Lyrianne's skin was the color of twilight, a rich, luminous purple that seemed to shift between lavender and deep violet depending on the light. Her hair cascaded in midnight waves, threaded with tiny crystals that chimed softly when she moved. She wore flowing robes of silver and deep blue, and her eyes, those extraordinary eyes, were the color of amethyst, bright and intelligent. Elias felt his breath catch. He'd seen holographic briefings, but they hadn't captured the grace of her movements, the quiet strength in her posture, or the way she observed the human delegation with curious interest, rather than the cold formality he'd expected from royalty. The greeting ceremonies proceeded according to protocol. Ambassador Whitmore presented credentials, King Verothan offered welcoming words in accented but perfect English, and various courtiers were introduced. Elias remained 2 steps behind the ambassador, as was proper, though he felt Lyrianne's gaze touch him more than once. Then came the ceremonial exchange of gifts. Lyrianne descended from the dais, moving with a fluid grace that reminded Elias of water flowing over stone. In her hands she carried a sphere of crystal no larger than an apple, perfectly clear except for a spiral of captured light at its core. It was the Lunara stone, Ambassador Whitmore had explained during briefings, a symbol of trust between peoples, held by Velisian royalty for 3,000 years. "We offer this in hope of harmony between our worlds," Lyrianne said, her voice like wind chimes, musical and clear. She spoke English flawlessly, though her accent added exotic rhythm to each word. She extended the crystal toward Ambassador Whitmore. But as she did, perhaps nervous or simply caught by the weight of tradition, her fingers slipped. The Lunara stone tumbled toward the polished floor. Elias didn't think. His body moved on instinct. He dropped to one knee, hands cupping together just in time to catch the crystal before it struck stone. The sphere settled into his palms, cool and humming with faint energy. Relief flooded through him. Disaster averted. He looked up at Lyrianne with a reassuring smile and rose smoothly, still cradling the precious object carefully. Then with both hands he lifted it and pressed it gently into her waiting palms, making sure she had a firm grip before releasing it. "Got it," he said softly, his smile widening. "No harm done?" The throne room fell absolutely silent. Elias's smile faltered. Every Velisian in the chamber had frozen, staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to awe. Several courtiers had placed their hands over their hearts. Ambassador Whitmore's face had gone pale, and Lyrianne, she stood perfectly still. The recovered crystal clutched to her chest, her violet eyes enormous and locked on Elias's face. A flush of deeper purple colored her cheeks and her lips parted in what looked like wonder. "Your Highness," one of her attendants whispered urgently, a slender woman with pale blue skin. "Did he just—" "Yes," Lyrianne breathed, never looking away from Elias. "He performed the kashari." "What's the kashari?" Elias whispered to Ambassador Whitmore. The ambassador's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I'll explain later." Smile. Bow. Don't do anything else. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had transformed entirely. Where before the Velisians had been formally polite, Now they watched Elias with something approaching reverence. Servants brought him the finest refreshments. Courtiers bowed when he passed. And Lyrian never took her eyes off him, a small, secret smile playing at the corners of her mouth. As the delegation was escorted to their guest quarters in the palace's west wing, Ambassador Whitmore pulled Elias aside. "Do you know what you just did?" "Caught a crystal?" Elias offered weakly. "You knelt before her. You received her possession into your hands. You returned it to her directly, with both hands while looking into her eyes." Whitmore ran his hand over his face. "In Valesian culture, that's the kashari, the gesture of mate selection. It's performed only once in a lifetime, only between bonded pairs." The words took a moment to penetrate. What? Princess Lyrian now believes you've chosen her as your mate, and by her acceptance of the crystal from your hands, she's accepted you as hers." Elias's legs felt weak, but I was just being helpful. "It was going to break." "I know that. You know that. But to them, you've just performed their most sacred bonding ritual." Whitmore gripped his shoulder. "This is a diplomatic nightmare, Crane. We need to figure out how to explain this without insulting the royal family or destroying the treaty negotiations. Until then, just try not to accidentally marry anyone else." That night, Elias stood on his quarters balcony, looking out at the alien city glowing beneath twin moons. Somewhere in this crystalline palace, a purple-skinned princess with eyes like precious gems thought she was his chosen mate. And the terrifying part? When he closed his eyes, he could still see her smile, still feel the strange warmth that had flooded through him when their fingers touched around that crystal. It was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission. Nothing would be simple anymore. Courtship confusion. Elias woke to find a garden on his balcony. Not a small arrangement, an actual garden. Flowering vines with blossoms that shifted from silver to blue climbed elegant trellises. Small trees with crystalline leaves chimed in the morning breeze. And at the center, in an ornate planter, grew flowers unlike anything Earth had ever produced. Moonflowers. Their petals closed tight against the daylight, waiting for darkness to reveal their luminescence. A card rested against the planter. Written in flowing script, "I'm for my chosen. May these blooms remind you that some things grow more beautiful in darkness." Oh no, Elias whispered. Ambassador Whitmore was less poetic in his assessment. "This is escalating rapidly," he said during their morning briefing, eyeing the garden through Elias's balcony doors. "Princess Lyrian sent gifts to your quarters. Personal gifts. Do you understand what that means?" "That she's being very nice?" Elias offered hopefully. "That she's courting you according to Valesian custom. The moonflowers are from the royal private gardens. They're never given except between bonded pairs." Whitmore paced the room. "I've been in emergency sessions with King Verithan's advisors all night. They're as surprised as we are, but they can't simply dismiss a kashari performed before the entire court. It's sacred to them. So what do we do? You need to speak with her. Explain it was a cultural misunderstanding. Gently." Whitmore fixed him with a stern look. "The treaty negotiations are at a critical phase. If we offend the princess, the king could withdraw entirely. Be diplomatic, Crane. That's literally your job." But being diplomatic proved impossible when Lyrian was involved. She appeared at breakfast, settling gracefully into the chair beside him in the delegation's private dining hall. Her presence scattered his thoughts like leaves in wind. Today she wore robes of deep purple that matched her skin, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her hair was arranged in an intricate style, revealing the elegant curve of her neck. "Good morning, Elias," she said, his name like music in her accent. "Did you find the moonflowers acceptable?" "They're beautiful, Your Highness, but please call me Lyrian." She placed her hand near his on the table, not quite touching but close enough that he felt the warmth radiating from her skin. "We are beyond formalities now." Across the table, Ambassador Whitmore gave him a meaningful look. "Princess Lyrian," Elias began carefully, "about yesterday in the throne room." "It was fate," she interrupted softly, her violet eyes luminous. "I have replayed the moment 1,000 times in my mind. The way you moved without hesitation, the care with which you held the Lunara stone, the warmth in your eyes when you returned it to me. You could have let it fall, or caught it and handed it to a servant, or given it to your ambassador. But you didn't. You knelt for me. You offered it to me alone. I was just trying to help. Yes." She smiled. and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. That is what makes it perfect. The Kishari is most sacred when performed from the heart, without calculation. You acted from instinct, from your true nature. That is how I know it was meant to be. Over the following days, Elias discovered what it meant to be courted by an alien princess. Lyrian appeared everywhere he went. When he toured the crystalline archives with the diplomatic team, she materialized to offer personal commentary on Velisian history. When he walked the palace gardens, she joined him, pointing out rare flora and explaining their significance. She sent gifts daily, books of Velisian poetry, rare fruits from distant provinces, a cloak woven with threads that absorbed sunlight and glowed softly at night. Her attendants treated him like royalty. The pale blue woman, Thessara he learned her name was, bowed deeply whenever they met. Palace servants competed to fulfill his needs before he could even voice them. Courtiers who had barely acknowledged him now sought his opinions on matters of art and philosophy. It was overwhelming. It was confusing. And worst of all, it was beginning to feel wonderful. Lyrian was extraordinary, not just beautiful, though she was that in ways that made his breath catch, but genuinely fascinating. She spoke 4 languages fluently, could debate quantum mechanics with the same ease as classical music, and had a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh. She asked questions about Earth with genuine curiosity, not the formal inquiries of diplomatic interest, but real wonder about human culture, art, dreams. "Tell me about rain," she said one afternoon as they walked through the Hall of Echoes, where crystalline walls reflected sound in harmonious patterns. Real rain, not the sanitized descriptions and data files. "What does it feel like?" Elias closed his eyes, remembering. "Like tiny promises falling from the sky. Cold ones, usually. Each drop is a little shock, but together they're cleansing. And the smell, petrichor we call it. It's earth and stone and life all mixed together. After a good rain, everything feels renewed." When he opened his eyes, she was watching him with such tenderness that his heart stumbled. "We have crystal storms here," she said softly. "Fragments of mineral that catch the light and create rainbows in the air. I would like to show you one when the season comes. And perhaps someday you could show me Earth's rain." That night, unable to sleep, Elias stood on his balcony among the moonflowers. They had bloomed with darkness, their petals unfolding to reveal bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently like slow heartbeats. They cast soft blue-white light across the balcony, and their fragrance was subtle, something between jasmine and starlight. If starlight had a scent. "They bloom only once," a voice said from the shadows. Elias turned to find Thessara standing at the balcony's edge, her blue skin nearly glowing in the moonflower light. Once in their entire life cycle. When a Velisian offers moonflowers, they are saying, "This moment, this feeling, will never come again. Treasure it." "I need to talk to her," Elias said. "This is a misunderstanding. I can't let her believe that you chose her." Thessara's expression was unreadable. "Did you not?" "No. I mean, I was just being polite." "The heart knows no politeness," Thessara interrupted. "It knows only truth. Your ambassador can explain human customs to King Varothan. Your diplomats can clarify cultural differences, but none of that changes what happened in the throne room." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I have served Princess Lyrian since we were children. I have never seen her look at anyone the way she looks at you. And I have watched you, Elias Crane. You may tell yourself this is obligation, but your eyes follow her when she leaves a room. You smile before she speaks as if anticipating her voice. Perhaps it began as accident. But what it has become, that is your choice to make." She left him alone with the moonflowers and his thoughts. The next evening, King Varothan hosted a formal reception in the Garden of Three Moons, an outdoor courtyard where carefully placed crystals refracted the light of Velisir's twin moons to create the illusion of a third. Hundreds attended. Velisian nobility in their flowing robes, the human delegation in formal attire, representatives from a dozen allied worlds. Lyrian found Elias beside a fountain, looking up at the triple moons. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. They strolled along paths lined with luminescent moss, leaving the crowd behind. The garden was vast, with alcoves and grottos that offered privacy. Finally, in a clearing surrounded by singing crystals that responded to movement with harmonic tones, Lyrian stopped. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you are confused. I know your customs differ from ours, but I cannot pretend anymore that this is merely tradition. Lyrian, please let me speak. She turned to face him fully, and in the triple moonlight, she was breathtaking. When you caught the Lunara stone, yes, you performed the Keshari, but that was simply the door opening. What has happened since, the conversations, the laughter, the way you truly listen when I speak, that is not custom. That is, she placed her hand over her heart, that is something rare and precious. I believe the Keshari was not coincidence. I believe something in you recognized something in me. And her voice broke slightly. I am falling in love with you, Elias Crane. The words hung in the air between them, shimmering with possibility and danger. Elias felt like he was standing at the edge of a precipice. One step forward would change everything. His career, his life, perhaps the fate of two worlds. One step back would be safe, diplomatic, sensible. He thought of Ambassador Whitmore's warnings. The treaty, his duty, everything that made sense. Then he looked into her violet eyes and saw hope and vulnerability, and something that matched the strange ache in his own chest. I have to be honest with you, he said slowly. When I caught that crystal, I had no idea what it meant. I was just trying to help. But you're right, something has changed. These past days with you. He struggled for words. I've never connected with anyone like this. You're brilliant and kind and funny, and yes, you're beautiful. But it's more than that. It's the way you see the world, the questions you ask, the way you make me think about things differently. Her expression brightened with fragile hope. But, he continued and watched that hope flicker, I need you to understand that in my culture, these feelings take time. We don't have a Keshari that binds us instantly. We have something slower, more uncertain. We call it dating or courting, and it means learning about each other without assumptions, without guarantees. If this is going to be real, truly real, not just a cultural tradition, I need to know that's what you want too. Not a mate chosen by ritual, but a partner chosen by the heart. Lyrian was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting in the fabric of her robes. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost fragile. I understand. You are saying that the Keshari does not mean to you what it means to me, that I have been presumptuous. No, I'm saying I have been foolish. A single tear traced down her purple cheek, catching the moonlight. I let myself believe in fate when I should have asked about choice. I apologize for my forwardness, Elias. I will not trouble you further. She turned and walked swiftly back toward the palace, her robes trailing behind her like shadows. Elias stood frozen in the clearing, the singing crystals responding to his ragged breathing with discordant tones. He had done the right thing. The diplomatic thing. He had explained the misunderstanding gently, preserved the possibility of friendship, protected both their hearts from assumptions built on cultural confusion. So why did it feel like he had just made the worst mistake of his life? Heart learns Truth Elias's quarters felt empty, without Lyrian's gifts arriving each morning. The moonflowers on his balcony had begun to wilt, their luminescence fading. He touched one drooping petal and it crumbled to silver dust. They bloom only once, Thessara had said. Treasure it. He hadn't. He'd been so focused on being diplomatic, on not causing an incident, that he'd crushed something rare before understanding its value. 3 days had passed since the garden. 3 days of catching glimpses of Lyrian at formal functions, watching her smile politely at visiting dignitaries while avoiding his eyes. 3 days of the moonflowers dying, petal by petal, like a countdown to something lost forever. Ambassador Whitmore noticed the change. You did the right thing, Crane, he said during a treaty review session. Painful perhaps, but necessary. Better a little heartache now than an interstellar incident later. But was it right? Elias couldn't focus on the treaty documents spread before him. His mind kept replaying that moment in the garden. The hurt in Lyrian's violet eyes, the way she'd said, I have been foolish, as if love itself was a mistake. That night, sleep eluded him. He stood on his balcony among the dying moonflowers and forced himself to confront an uncomfortable truth. He hadn't explained the misunderstanding to protect her. He'd done it to protect himself, because Thessara had been right. His heart had recognized something in that throne room, in that instant when crystal met palm and violet eyes met his. He'd felt it, The click of something falling into place like a key finding its lock, and that terrified him. Falling for an alien princess wasn't part of his careful career plan. It meant complications, sacrifices, choosing between duty and desire. So he'd hidden behind cultural differences and noble explanations about taking time, about choice and uncertainty. But the truth was simpler and more frightening. He had chosen. His heart had chosen the moment he knelt for her. Everything since had been his mind scrambling to catch up, throwing up walls of reason against something that needed no reason at all. "I'm an idiot," he whispered to the dying flowers. A sound made him turn. Thessera stood in his doorway, backlit by the corridor's soft glow. "Yes," she agreed, "but perhaps a redeemable one. How is she?" The question escaped before he could stop it. "She reviews the ancient texts each night in her chambers. She reads about the Kashari, about bonds broken by misunderstanding, about the difference between choice and fate." Thessera's expression softened. "She is trying to understand how something that felt so certain could be merely accident." "It wasn't," Elias said. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. "It wasn't accident. I was just too afraid to admit it." "Then perhaps," Thessera said quietly, "you should tell her that. Before the moonflowers finish dying, before she convinces herself that what she felt was only tradition talking, when we both know it was her heart." After Thessera left, Elias stood frozen for a moment. Then he moved. He wasn't sure what he was looking for in the palace's vast archives until he found it. A section on Velician bonding customs with detailed explanations of the Kashari and its variations. He read by crystal light until his eyes burned, absorbing everything he should have learned before that fateful day in the throne room. The Kashari had layers he hadn't understood. Yes, kneeling and offering were central, but the gesture's meaning came from intention, from the heart's direction. It could be performed as pure ceremony, politically arranged, emotionally empty, or it could be what he'd done, spontaneous, genuine, emerging from one's truest self. The texts were clear. Accidental Kashari was rare, but not unheard of. The remedy wasn't dismissal, but clarification. If both parties acknowledged the accident and chose to pursue connection anyway, the bond was considered even stronger. Fate opening the door, choice walking through it. He'd explained the accident, but he'd never expressed the choice. Dawn was breaking, Belisar's sun painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, when Elias finally returned to his quarters. The last moonflower clung to life, one petal still glowing faintly. He had to see her, had to explain. But protocol dictated that the princess's private chambers were absolutely off limits, and after their garden conversation, he had no right to request an audience. So Elias did something desperate. He asked the palace where Lyrianne might be. The crystalline walls responded to polite inquiry, one of Velisar's technologies that still amazed him. A soft chime directed him toward the eastern gardens, to a section he'd never explored, the Crystal Observatory, where ancient Velicians had studied the stars. He found her there at dawn, standing beneath a dome of transparent crystal that framed the lightening sky. She wore simple robes of pale lavender, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the regal princess who had stood beside the throne. "Lyrianne," he said softly. She turned, surprise flashing across her face before she schooled it to polite neutrality. "Elias, I did not expect you honor me with your presence," the formal words stung. They were strangers again, diplomat and princess, nothing more. "I've been reading," he began awkwardly, "about the Kashari, about what it means and doesn't mean. And I realized I explained everything wrong in the garden. You were honest. That is not wrong. But I wasn't, not completely." He moved closer and she didn't retreat. "I told you it was accident, that I didn't know what the gesture meant." That was true. But I made it sound like that was all it was. Just a cultural misunderstanding that could be dismissed and forgotten. And that was a lie. Her violet eyes fixed on him, guarded but listening. "The truth is, something happened in that throne room. I felt it, Lyrianne. When our hands touched around that crystal, when I looked up and saw you, something in me recognized you. Not because of custom or ritual, but because..." He struggled for words. "Have you ever met someone and felt like you'd been searching for them without knowing it? Like some part of you that was always holding its breath suddenly exhaled?" A tremor ran through her. and she wrapped her arms around herself. Yes, she whispered. That is exactly how the Keshari is supposed to feel. When two souls recognize their match, I panicked, Elias admitted, because I'm practical and cautious and falling for someone, especially an alien princess when I'm supposed to be focused on diplomatic duty, wasn't in my plans. So I hid behind the excuse of cultural differences. I told myself I needed time and certainty when really I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Of this. He gestured between them. Of something so intense it doesn't make logical sense. Of choosing a path I can't predict or control, of... He took a breath. Of falling in love with you and not knowing if I'm enough. If a human diplomat's assistant could ever be worthy of a Valesian princess. Tears gathered in her eyes, making them shine like jewels. You think you are not worthy? Are you kidding? You're brilliant, beautiful, royal. I'm nobody special. I'm just the man who knelt for me, she interrupted softly. Not because I commanded it, but because his instinct was kindness. The man who catches falling things and returns them with care. The man who asks about rain and truly listens to answers. The man whose smile reaches his eyes when he is happy. Whose brow furrows when he is thinking. Who gestures with his hands when he is excited about ideas. She stepped closer. You are not nobody special, Elias. You are the one my heart chose. Before my mind understood why. They stood in the growing daylight, crystal walls refracting rainbow patterns around them. I don't know how this works, Elias said honestly. Between our worlds, our cultures. But I want to try. I want to learn about Keshari and soul ribbons and whatever other traditions matter to you. And I want you to learn about how humans court. Awkward first dates, holding hands during walks, the terrible poetry we write when we're falling in love. He held out his hand. I want to choose you, Lyrian. Not because I accidentally performed a ritual, but because spending these past 3 days without you has shown me what my life would be like without your laughter, your intelligence, your presence, and I don't want that life. She looked at his offered hand for a long moment. If we do this, it will not be easy. There will be political complications, cultural challenges. My father may object. Your superiors may disapprove. I know. We will have to learn each other's languages of love. Sometimes we will misunderstand. Sometimes we will hurt each other without meaning to. I know that too. And yet you still offer your hand? I do, with full knowledge and clear intention. I choose you, Princess Lyrian. Is that enough? She placed her hand in his, and where their skin touched, warmth bloomed like sunrise. It is everything, she whispered. Then she did something that made his heart stop. She knelt before him, graceful and deliberate, and looked up with those extraordinary violet eyes. The Keshari is traditionally performed by the one who chooses. But there is a lesser-known tradition, the Kesharivel, the answering gesture. Will you teach me the proper way? Elias knelt before her, both of them eye to eye now, equal in position and intention. I think we can create our own way. They knelt together in the crystal observatory as dawn broke fully over Velisar, two people from different worlds choosing the same future. When they finally stood, Lyrian took both his hands in hers. Will you walk with me? There is much I wish to show you, if you are to understand Valesian courtship, and much I wish to learn about human ways of love. I'd like that, Elias said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As they left the observatory hand in hand, neither noticed the figure watching from a high balcony, King Verothan, who had observed the entire exchange. His expression was unreadable as he turned away. The real challenges were only beginning. Learning to love between worlds. The following weeks unfolded like a flower opening to sunlight, slowly, carefully revealing beauty one petal at a time. Lyrian taught Elias the art of breath-sharing, a Valesian intimacy where partners synchronized their breathing under the light of twin moons, connecting their life rhythms. They sat together in her private garden, foreheads nearly touching, breathing in unison until Elias felt their heartbeats align. It was more intimate than any kiss he'd known on Earth. In my culture, she explained softly, her breath warm against his face. We believe that souls speak through breath. When two people can breathe as one, their spirits are conversing. What are our spirits saying? Elias whispered. Her smile was tender. They are saying finally. He taught her about human dancing, awkwardly at first because the palace had no music quite like Earth's. But Thessera found recordings from the diplomatic files. And one evening in an empty ballroom, Elias showed Lyrian how to waltz. She laughed when he stepped on her foot, and the sound was worth any embarrassment. Humans court through coordinated stumbling? She teased, her eyes bright with mirth. We call it finding your rhythm together, he said, pulling her closer. Sometimes you step on toes before you learn the dance. Her expression softened. That is beautiful, actually. More honest than pretending we know the steps from the beginning. They shared their worlds through stories. Lyrian described crystal storms that painted the sky in prismatic light. Festivals where Velisians wove ribbons of bioluminescent silk through the air, creating living art. Elias told her about Earth's oceans, snow falling on pine forests, the smell of coffee in morning cafes, the sound of rain on rooftops. I want to see rain, she said one night, curled beside him on a garden bench, her head resting against his shoulder, a gesture she'd adopted from human customs. I want to feel those tiny promises you described. And I want to dance with you in a crystal storm, Elias replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. That was new too, kissing. She'd been curious about the human custom, and their first kiss had been experimental, tentative. Now, weeks later, kissing Lyrian felt as natural as breathing. But not everyone approved of their growing bond. Ambassador Whitmore grew increasingly concerned. The treaty negotiations are stalling, he warned. King Verothan hasn't explicitly objected to your relationship, but the royal advisors are making noises about traditional matches, and Earth's diplomatic corps is questioning whether you can remain objective. Elias knew the ambassador was right to worry, but he also knew he couldn't walk away now. Not from this. The crisis came during a formal state dinner. King Verothan rose to make an announcement, his expression grave. It has come to my attention that my daughter, Princess Lyrian, has formed an attachment to the human delegation. His eyes found Elias across the crowded hall. While we value our alliance with Earth, Velisian tradition dictates that royal marriages must serve the kingdom's interests.
I have arranged a proper match for my daughter with Prince Kelvorn of the Western Provinces. The hall erupted in murmurs.
Lyrian stood abruptly, her face pale. Father, the decision is made, King Verothan said firmly. You will honor your duty to Velisar. That night Lyrian came to Elias's quarters, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. He held her while she cried, feeling helpless and furious. I will not marry Kelvorn, she said fiercely. I will refuse. I will renounce my title if necessary. Don't, Elias said, though the words cost him. Don't give up your responsibilities for me. There has to be another way. What other way? My father has decided. And your superiors will surely separate us to preserve diplomatic relations. They held each other in desperate silence, the moonflowers on the balcony blooming bright, as if in defiance of the darkness closing around them. But Elias wasn't ready to surrender. That night he requested a private audience with King Verothan. The king received him in a small chamber, away from the formality of the throne room. Verothan looked older in the dim light, weary. You wish to plead for my daughter's hand, the king said. It wasn't a question. I wish to understand what I must do to be worthy of it, Elias replied. You're right, I'm not Velisian nobility. I have no political alliances to offer. No territories or titles. But I love your daughter, and I believe love between worlds could strengthen our alliance more than any arranged marriage. Love. Verothan said the word like a foreign concept. Love is a luxury for common people, young man. Royalty must think of kingdoms. Then let me prove myself. Give me a task, a challenge, anything. Let me show you that I can serve both Lyrian and Velisar. The king studied him for a long moment. The mining treaty negotiations have reached an impasse over profit distribution. If you can propose a solution that satisfies both our worlds, using your unique position as someone who understands both cultures, I will consider your suit. It was a nearly impossible task. The negotiation points that had stalled involved complex economic projections and centuries-old Velisian resource laws. But Elias threw himself into it, working with both delegations, finding creative compromises that honored both cultures' values. Lyrian helped, her knowledge of Velisian law proving invaluable. They worked side by side late into each night, and the collaboration deepened their connection. This wasn't just romance anymore. It was partnership. Finally, after 10 days of exhaustive work, they presented a revised treaty framework to both governments. It restructured profit sharing to honor Velisian traditions while meeting Earth's economic needs, and included cultural exchange programs that would benefit both worlds. King Verothan reviewed it carefully, his advisors whispering around him. Finally, he looked up at Elias. "This is acceptable. More than acceptable. It is inspired." "It wasn't just me," Elias said. "Lyrianne, I know my daughter's hand in this," Verothan interrupted. "Which proves my point. You work well together. You understand each other's strengths." He paused. "Perhaps I was wrong about arranged duty. Perhaps the strongest alliance is one chosen by the heart." Hope flared in Elias's chest, but Verothan held up a hand. "However, Valesian tradition cannot be completely ignored. If you wish to bond with my daughter, you must perform the Kashari properly, publicly, deliberately, before both our worlds. You must declare your choice in a way that leaves no doubt." "I will," Elias said immediately. "When?" "At the treaty signing ceremony. Before Earth and Valisir formalize their alliance, you will formalize yours with my daughter. If you are certain." Elias thought of Lyrianne's laugh, her brilliant mind, the way she looked at him like he was something precious. He thought of breath-sharing under twin moons, of dancing in empty ballrooms, of building a life between two worlds. "I've never been more certain of anything. The choice that binds." The grand amphitheater glittered with crystals that caught and reflected light from 1,000 sources. Representatives from Earth and Valisar filled the seats. Diplomats, nobility, press from both worlds. The treaty signing was meant to be the culmination of months of negotiation, a historic alliance between species. But first, there would be another kind of alliance. Elias stood at the center of the amphitheater floor, his formal diplomatic uniform replaced by robes of deep blue, traditional Valesian courting colors that Lyrianne had chosen for him. His heart hammered against his ribs. Ambassador Whitmore had been furious at first, calling it a publicity stunt that could jeopardize everything. But when Elias explained King Verithan's approval, the ambassador had softened. "Just don't mess it up, Crane, and for God's sake remember which knee to kneel on." Lyrianne entered from the opposite side, and Elias's breath caught. She wore robes of silver and white that made her purple skin luminous. Her hair was unbound, cascading down her back in midnight waves, a symbol of vulnerability and trust in Valesian culture. She walked toward him slowly, her violet eyes never leaving his face. The amphitheater fell silent. King Verothan stood from his seat of honor. "We gather to witness not only the bonding of worlds, but the bonding of hearts. My daughter, Princess Lyrianne, and Elias Crane of Earth have requested to perform the Kashari before our assembled peoples. Let all present understand. What happens here is sacred. It cannot be undone. It is a promise spoken by souls heard by the universe itself." Lyrianne reached the center and stopped before Elias. Up close, he could see she was trembling slightly. "Are you nervous?" he whispered. "Terrified," she admitted. "You?" "Completely. But also completely sure." She smiled, and it steadied them both. Elias had rehearsed this moment 100 times with Thesara coaching him, learning the proper words, the precise gestures. But now, standing before Lyrianne with two worlds watching, he forgot every practiced phrase. Instead, he simply spoke from his heart. "When I first came to Valisar, I thought I was here to help negotiate a treaty. I thought I understood my purpose." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small object, the replica of the Lunara stone that Lyrianne had gifted him weeks ago. It glowed softly in his palms. "Then you dropped something precious and I caught it. I didn't know that gesture would change my life, but I'm grateful for every moment since." He knelt slowly, deliberately, holding the crystal sphere in both hands. The amphitheater was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. "In your culture, this gesture means I choose you as my mate. In my culture, kneeling means I honor you, respect you, and offer myself honestly." He looked up at her, this extraordinary woman who had taught him about breath-sharing and soul ribbons, who laughed at his terrible jokes and challenged his assumptions about everything. "I choose you, Lyrianne, not because of accident or tradition, but because loving you has made me better than I was. Because your mind fascinates me, your heart inspires me, and your presence makes me want to be worthy of standing beside you. I offer you this stone, but more. I offer you my days and nights, my laughter and tears, my failures and victories. I offer you all that I am and all that I hope to become." He extended the crystal toward her, hands steady despite his racing heart. Tears streamed freely down Lyrianne's face now, catching the light like diamonds against her purple skin. She reached down and accepted the crystal, cradling it carefully. The Keshari Vel. she said, her voice ringing clear through the amphitheater, the answering. In accepting this gift, I accept you, Elias Crane. I choose you as my partner, my companion, my love. Then she knelt as well, so they were face to face, equal in position. You have taught me that love is not just fate. It is choice renewed each day. So I choose you today, and I will choose you tomorrow. And all the tomorrows after. She placed the crystal between them on the ground, then took both his hands in hers. Will you perform the breath sharing with me? Before all these witnesses, will you let our souls speak? Yes, Elias whispered. They leaned toward each other, foreheads touching, and began to breathe in unison. The amphitheater faded away until there was only this, the rhythm of shared breath, the warmth of her skin against his, the sense of two separate beings becoming one harmonious whole. When they finally pulled back, Lyrianne was smiling through her tears. Now, she said, I believe humans have a custom to seal such promises. They do, Elias confirmed and kissed her. The amphitheater erupted in applause, humans and Velisians together, celebrating a bond that transcended species and culture. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, King Varathon approached. The Keshari is complete, he announced. My daughter has chosen, and I give my blessing. May your bond bring strength to both your lives and both our worlds. Ambassador Whitmore was beaming despite himself. Well, Crane, you've certainly made history. The first human-Velisian bonding. The press is going to have a field day. Let them, Elias said, not taking his eyes off Lyrianne. I've got more important things to focus on. The treaty signing that followed was almost anticlimactic compared to the emotional weight of the Keshari. But as both delegations signed the historic document, Elias felt the symmetry of it, two worlds coming together, just as he and Lyrianne had. That night, under Velisar's twin moons, they stood in the crystal observatory where they'd first admitted their feelings. So, Lyrianne said, wrapped in his arms, we are bonded now, by Velisian law and human choice both. What happens next? Elias asked. We build a life, learn each other's languages and customs more deeply, navigate the politics of being an interspecies couple under constant scrutiny. She tilted her head to look up at him. We argue about small things and laugh about big things. We show both our worlds that love can bridge any distance, even the distance between stars. That sounds perfect. And someday, she added softly, when we are ready, you will take me to Earth, and I will feel rain on my skin, those tiny promises falling from the sky. And I'll bring you back here for crystal storms, Elias promised. We'll dance in rainbow light. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moons arc across the alien sky. In the distance, the capital city of Velisar glowed with celebration, lights and music marking the treaty and the bonding both. Elias thought about the moment he'd caught that falling crystal, how a simple gesture of kindness had set his whole life on a new trajectory. Some might call it fate, others might call it accident. He called it the best thing that ever happened to him. Thank you, he whispered against Lyrianne's hair. For what? For dropping that crystal. For seeing something in me worth choosing. For teaching me that love doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be true. Lyrianne turned in his arms and kissed him softly. No, she said. Thank you for catching it. For catching me when I fell, and for letting me catch you in return. Above them, the twin moons shone bright, bearing witness to a love that had begun with one small gesture and grown into something that would span worlds. Some bonds are forged by tradition, some by duty, but the strongest bonds, the ones that truly last, are forged by choice, renewed each day as constant as breath itself. And in the space between two worlds, beneath alien stars, Elias and Lyrianne had found exactly that. The end.